Welcome, everybody, to the Cincinnati Bengals Weekly Show on the Grilling Truth Sports Network. And today we're going to look back at the all-time Cincinnati Bengals offensive team. We got some special guests here. First, I want to remind you guys you can follow us on Twitter at Grilling Truth, or you also can do it on YouTube. Make sure you click on the links in the description in the box to go to BetMGM, the best sports book to bet on the Bengals this year. But we're going to start this off. I am your co-host, Mike Goodpaster. I want to welcome in, as always, my normal co-host, number 58 for the Cincinnati Bengals in the 1980s, Joe Kelly. How you doing, Joe?
Man, great day to be a Bengal fan, man. It's exciting. Again, we have those great Super Bowl aspirations again, man. I almost told Tiff the other week, I almost had a heart attack when I turned and looked at the news and seen that Joe went down. That was a rough 10 minutes. So hopefully he'll bounce back, and we're gonna have a very, very exciting season.
All right, and of course we have a couple special guests up on the top right there. We have Jim Foster. I think some people know him as Bengal Jim. He's probably the most popular Bengal there is right now, too. How you doing, Bengal?
Man, good to see you guys. Hall of Fame week, man. Ken Riley going up to Canton tomorrow. Going to be at the induction ceremony Saturday afternoon. So excited about it. First of many more to come. We got Ken Riley going in this time around. I think Ken Anderson's very close. I think Willie Anderson's almost there. I think Ken Riley opened the floodgates here. We're going to have a lot more of our Bengal legends represented in the Hall of Fame here very soon, guys.
Yeah, it'll be about time. And now we have the first selection in the 1968 NFL draft. He is the original Bengal. He was a center for a little over a decade, if we count that short comeback, Bob. Help us welcome to the Grilling Truth, Bob Johnson. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me. Can I make a real quick comment about Ken Riley?
Yes.
Kenny was one of the finest men you've ever been around. I mean, he wasn't flashy. Lamar Parrish at the time may have gotten a little more publicity, but I'll tell you, Kenny was, he and I were the two captains for years, and he was just about as fine a guy and a great player, really good player, but almost a better person. I mean, he was just solid as he could be, never complained, worked hard, great leader. I can't say enough about Kenny.
Yeah, and I mean, I think all of us at least knew him a little bit. I got to interview him a few years ago. He was a great guy. I also got to do Lamar. I think when you look back at that 70s team you were on, Bob, that was one of the greatest secondaries in NFL history when you throw in Tommy Casanova with Lamar Parrish and Ken Riley.
Yeah, I totally agree. The three of those guys were really good. And, Lamar and Tommy were both terrific punt returners. A lot of times, starters weren't the punt returners, but they were so good at it, but they were so different. Lamar would run 200 yards to get a 30-yard run back, and Tommy would run 31 yards to get his 30, but they were very, very effective, both of them. And really both terrific, hard-nosed, good competitors and really good. Actually, Casanova and I see each other because we've got a place in Gulf Shores, Alabama, that's about 20 miles from New Orleans. And I do get to see Tommy some. He's in Crowley, which is a little bit north of there, but great guy.
All right, guys, let's go ahead. Let's start this off. We're going to start off with offensive tackle, which to me, I mean, this comes down between three guys for two spots. I think we all could probably just start off this by Anthony Munoz is everybody's number one offensive tackle, correct?
No question. We can skip that one.
Yeah. Now, the question is, though, when you go to right tackle, you've got Willie Anderson, you got Andrew Whitworth. Both of those guys, I think, eventually will be in the Hall of Fame. So we'll let Bob start this off. Bob, who would be your second tackle to pair with Anthony Munoz?
Well, let me back up one thing. Have you guys seen Munoz play baseball or softball? I mean,
I can tell you this. He played third base for a World Series championship team under Ron Dato at USC.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I know. And I'll tell you, if you watched him, he played short. The Bengals had a bad, other than him, a bad charity softball team, if you remember that. And maybe they still do it, but it's probably these guys are making so much money now they don't bother to. But we got paid, $250 each to play a game. Munoz played shortstop, and if you didn't realize how big he was, you'd look at him at a distance and say, he's 5'10", 170 pounds because he moves so beautifully. The guy was a mutant. I mean, you just don't find people that big with that much athletic talent. He could have been a tight end. I mean, I may have this is kind of stupid stuff, but on our day off, we had, Paul Brown at least gave us Mondays off, and then we all came in for a light workout on Tuesday. And the cloudy offensive lineman ended up just the offensive lineman in a touch football game, which was almost funny, But Munoz was unfair. Yeah, he was just such a good athlete.
Yeah, I saw him play one of those charity basketball games in like the early '80s, and he wasn't a bad basketball player either.
So but just watching him move on a basketball court, you just see what a beautiful athlete he was. And actually his son was a good player. He just wasn't as athletic because I played at Tennessee and his son Michael signed with Tennessee and stayed for a while, but didn't stay for the whole time. But he was a good player.
Yeah, I think Michael had a knee injury right before his senior year or something. But
yeah, a couple knee.
Yeah. So Bob, who would be your second offensive tackle?
Second off, I think Whitworth. I didn't play with him, but the more you look at him, the nice thing about the way football has evolved, and you guys know that offensive line play has changed so much since they've liberalized holding. You get this now. You get this force equals mass times acceleration because you're not going to the Mike Reeds of this world, the little quick defensive tackles, probably couldn't play today because some big fat guard would stick his hand out and grab him. Yeah. And so you got to be bigger. So I think the game is quite different. They don't run the ball as much as we did, but you had to run the ball just to keep defensive linemen honest a little bit. But I still think Anthony Munoz, regardless of the setting, would have been the best player. Behind him, I think Whitworth.
All right. I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to go Willie Anderson. I think Willie Anderson gets a little undersold because of the teams and how bad they were that he was on. And, he was a big reason why Corey Dillon was so successful. Most of those balls that were run to the right. I'm gonna go Willie Anderson. Jim, am I crazy, or are you going with Whitworth?
No, I'm going with Willie Anderson, man. 4-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro. This guy pass blocked on teams every game. They had to pass block early because they got behind so many times. This guy.
Can I back up and say it's a tie? I didn't think about Whitworth.
It's all right.
Great.
Hey, the more we disagree, the better the show is.
It's funny, man, because Pro Football Focus they didn't have the grading system back during Willie Anderson's time. This guy, Michael Strahan, we got some video from Michael Strahan a few years ago. We did a
I've seen that. Did you see the highlight video of him against Michael Strahan that Willie posted?
Yeah. So when Pro Football Focus did these gradings, they went back since 2006 among all offensive Hall of Fame offensive linemen. Willie Anderson has the third highest PFF grade out of every Hall of Fame offensive lineman since 2006. This guy was legit, not just a hell of a pass blocker. This guy was a dominant run blocker as well. Again, we're splitting hairs here. We got 3 damn good tackles to choose from. There's no wrong answer here, but I'm going. Obviously, Anthony, I'm going Willie.
Yeah. All right, Joe.
I'm just glad they weren't grading me.
I'm going with Anthony as well. Obviously the greatest offensive tackle in football history. But my number 2 pick will definitely be Willie. Andrew was great. He was great. He's awesome. Got him Super Bowl. So that's it's great for him. But when you look at Willie and look at his size and his athleticism and you look at the defensive ends that are in the Hall of Fame that he went up against, and some of them he dominated. So I never got to when I was on my way out of the league when he was on his way in. So I knew him. We had the same agent. Just a really good guy, man. And I would definitely say he's the second best tackle in Bengal history, and Andrew's close third, no doubt.
Yeah, Mike, what's interesting about this, man? Again, I think all 3 of these guys any of them could be in there, but when you have like opposing Hall of Fame type caliber people like Michael Strahan, Bill Cowher, and these guys coming out talking about Willie Anderson, why he should be in the Hall of Fame, man, that speaks volume because it's one thing for your teammates to talk about you, but we got people of that level, the Boomer Esiasons, the Michael Strahans and the Bill Cowers of the world talking about you, stomping the ground, hitting the desk, pounding the pavement, helping kind of support these guys. It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. One quick thing. I played center, obviously, and in a couple of All-Star games, they tried to make me be the fourth offensive tackle, and they said, "How about there and take a couple of pass rushes at tackle?" That's a tough thing. I mean, you got to have quick feet and change directions and still have enough ballast not to people have run over you. I think offensive tackles, of course, now as they've changed the rules, they're getting a little more publicity. But even when I played, it's a position that takes a real athletic, at least athletic footwork. It's in a lot of ways, it's tougher than playing guard or center.
Yeah, especially nowadays, as fast and as big as the defensive ends are.
Yeah.
All right, let's transition. Let's go to offensive guard.
Oh.
So, offensive guard. Who's your number one guy, Joe?
Max
Max Montoya. I agree.
That's my guy. It's my buddy, man. We played together here, and we played together on the Raiders as well. So we had a great career. And you just talk about we always talk about how great a guy Anthony is. Max is that guy, as well. Max wasn't as big, physically imposing as Anthony was, but Maxie brought his lunch pail every single day. He's a dude, man, that I'll go down the alley in South Central LA at 3:00 in the morning with Maxie, and we'll feel safe. So that's my guy. That's my buddy, man. So number one guy, I'm gonna go with him, no doubt.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt number one is Max Montoya for me too, Jim.
Yeah. So understand Max Montoya. James Brooks called him the best pulling guard he's ever played with, ever. This guy was just consistency. This guy's a Ring of Honor candidate, and he is a Hall of Fame caliber guard, period. So he's one of the great eight that we're focusing on when we're talking about the Hall of Fame. He's on that list, man. That's how good this guy was. I think it's a no-brainer, number one, Max Montoya.
All right, Bob, agree or disagree?
I agree with Max. If once it gets more current, I probably am not a very valued opinion. We had a menagerie of guards when I played. Not sure any of them were as good as Max. So I'll stop at that.
But I can give you this. My second guard is Pat Matson. And the thing about Pat Matson was he was one of the few guys. He was great getting out in space. He was an undersized guy. But if you watch the old Steeler Bengal games, he did as good a job against a guy like Mean Joe Green as anybody did.
Yeah, I think the drawback with Pat was he was a weightlifting, puffed up 240, 2 or 3. Yeah. I mean, if you looked at him, he almost looked his calves and his thighs compared to his knees, his biceps and his forearms compared to his elbows. Look, the more you look, you have to look closely, but it's a little freakish because he was an incredible weightlifter. Not so much pure strength, because there were a couple people on the team, including me, who could, out bench press him. But if you said, let's take a decent sized weight, like 250 pounds on a bench press, the man could bench press it forever. Now we didn't test people for how many times could you bench press 2 1/4 or something like that, but he would be as good as anybody today. He was a very unusual, not anywhere near the natural talent that some other people had, but you talk about a self-made body. He was something in that direction.
Yeah, the thing with him, the thing that really hurt him was he had a lot of injury issues.
Well, I think part of it is just that he wasn't naturally that big. There was a lot of, I had a lot of artificial weight, but not as a percent like him. I'm about 200 pounds now, and I played about 265, and it's the same thing that you see now, that you lift weights and eat and lift weights and eat, and you put on extra weight. It makes you bigger and stronger, and I think you can be explosive at that size. But there are some people that were naturally. Vernon Holland, when I played, was a very good offensive tackle. He wasn't much of a physical culturist, which I think cut his career short. He really only had 3 or 4 really good years when he was, the 24 to 28, when, prime of his playing time. But, man, he was something. All
right, Jim, who's your guards?
So I got Montoya, and I'm going Bruce Kozerski, guys. I'm going Kozerski. You talking about a guy that played for the team, 84 to mid-90s. This guy was a mainstay on there. That's again, I remember Pat Matson. I was young when I watched Pat. a damn good guard, but I got to go Montoya and Kozerski at the guard position for me.
All right. Bill, or go ahead, Bob. Who was your
Am
second
I
guy?
allowed to?
Yeah.
I think
Bob, you
Lapham,
can't keep getting 1As, man. 1As and 2Bs, man. You got to stick with it, brother.
I'm telling you, I think Lapham deserves it. I think Dave Lapham was.
See, Bob, you took my guy, man. Come on, dude.
Oh, I stole it.
Once again, everybody can pick whoever they think, Joe. He didn't
Yeah.
take your guy. You can still take your guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna take my guy, man. I played against Kozerski, and he was at that time you think about our offensive linemen back then in the mid '80s with Anthony, Joe Walters, Max, Kozerski. Had probably at that time the best offensive line, playing wise, best offensive line in football.
I think you're right.
But I didn't play against Lap, but I seen some highlights of Lap, and he was a powerful guy, man, and could do a lot of things: pull, pass block, run block. I'm gonna put him ahead of Kozerski. Kozerski's up there. Kozerski, he needed a little more junk in the trunk. For me, he was one of the lighter guys. It was some tough guards that I played against. But I'm gonna put Lap in there, and Kaz is up there definitely.
You know what's interesting, guys, is Lap's always talking about. You hear him talking all the time about versatility. Lap played every position on that offensive line. I go back and watch these game films from the 70s and the 80s when Lap was playing. One game he's playing center, another game he's playing guard. Hell, he played tackles. This guy played every position on an offensive line. Bob, not everybody can do that.
Well, I mean, I'm a classic. You should put me at tackle and watch how bad I am. But no, Lap, I got clipped playing the Oilers. Yeah, we're dating ourselves out of the Houston Oilers. I got clipped badly and broke my ankle. I want to say my 6th year, and Lapham had been the backup center, but he had never taken a snap at center because I took every single snap at offensive center for 6 years. Lap came over and played very well. I mean, he was I thought could have been he was a really fine center.
Yep, I'm staying with Pat Matson. I don't really care. So,
and what a good guy. I mean, he's really a fine person.
Yeah.
All right, Bob, we'll let you start the next position off. Center.
Man, Bob, you bet not say anybody but yourself, brother.
Oh, hey, Joe, remember this when we do the defensive show. You better pick yourself a linebacker.
It is. You watch centers play, and they're at a disadvantage, especially against defensive tackles, and and I think especially when I played, Curly Culp was, and still my view, the absolute best nose man that's ever played. And I don't know if you remember him, but he was like 6'1", 305 pounds, NCAA heavyweight wrestling champion 2 years running. I asked him after a game one time, "Hey, Curly, how big are your arms?" And I don't know if you guys follow weightlifting or bodybuilding, but he says they're 20 and a half. Well, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. And the guy was like, he was built like a little bear because he was, like I said, he's 6'1", 290 or something like that. Quick as could be, strong as could be, two-time NCAA heavyweight wrestler. So he had a great feel for you when he got a hold of you. And it wasn't just me who had trouble with him. You watch films of him against every center. And it was awful, and he played noseman. So when they did at one point change to a 4-3 and he was head up on the guard, he wasn't anywhere near as effective because he couldn't get to you right off and use his strength and the feel for wrestling. But he wasn't as good a defensive tackle, but man, what a noseman. I mean, you could argue that the Steelers defensive tackles were quite good. Joe Green was really good. Holmes, I tell you, Ernie Holmes.
A little bit. They were pretty good guys.
Hey, guys, I think what we're facing right now is Bob has to pick a center, and he's trying to deflect until one of us starts.
Bob, man, it's all right, brother. Go ahead.
I'm talking about the best Bengal center.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's what we're talking about today, Bob.
Dissipating. The best center was Jim Otto that played for the Raiders. But let me back up. I mean, that's a tough one. Kozerski was really good. But the other thing that gets lost in all of that with Max Montoya, Munoz is a superstar. And sort of as a consequence, I think, people had to overplay for Munoz. You don't give any help to that defensive end, and Munoz wins. So, in some cases, that takes a little pressure off the rest of the offensive linemen. There's some yin and yang to that. But Bruce was a very good center. In his own way, Blair Bush was a good center. He was not a power blocker, but he was very clever. Pardon?
Blair Bush.
Yeah, he was a good player. Yep. Played a long time, and he didn't knock people backwards. But if you backed up and look at how effective he was, especially cutting people off, he was really good. He was one of these weird guys that I swear to God he could play, go forward, make cuts with his head a foot off the ground. I mean, it was every offensive line coach, you got to stay low to drive people back. Well, he could stay low. I mean, he was an unusual physical person. But anyway, yeah.
Hey, Bob, I got a question for you. What about a guy like Bob Johnson?
Honestly,
damn it, Bob, say it.
I think I was a good player. I mean, I think I was a good player. I think, there's some intangibles that help. I didn't miss a play. I was always, Kenny Riley and I were always the captains. I liked the guys I played with. That's as far as I'm going to go. I don't know, you always.
All right, Bob. Bob, stop, man. Okay.
Yeah, this show's going to go an hour and a half with Bob.
I got I'm going to pick Bob.
You're going to pick Bob.
And like I said, Bob is a little older than me, but, just kind of, I've watched a lot of film, man. And when you just talk about the longevity and when you're talking about playing in the trenches and starting, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and you don't miss a game, you gotta be lucky, because NFL, you gotta be lucky because it's tough. Yep. But when you're talking about durability, and when you look at the center, they say the quarterback is the leader, no, the center, because the center has to call everything. You calling, first of all, you're calling what you're doing, and then you're gonna recall based on what we do as defense. So, every single play, you're going to have a play, but, that blocking may change if it's pass, and they're coming and they're blitzing. So you may have called, we're going to go right, and they do a stunt, and you're talking all day. So that takes a lot. And I was going to, say Blair, but Bob, I'm going to give you the nod, brother. I'm going to give you the nod, man. And, Blair, I love Blair. Blair's a great guy, man. He's Husky. So
I'm sorry. The one thing that used to make a lot of sense is these calls could be quite complicated. You'd have a trap, and the left guard was going to pull and trap, and they give you an overshifted thing, and we make a call, and the right tackle would pull and trap the nose man. So calls are a big deal. And, you can – You don't want
to, I know. I heard you guys all game long. You guys never shut up. Just kept talking. You had to all game long, bro.
And I'm not going to tell you who it was, but we had a guard. I swear that every other play, you get down and they go, down, set, and he'd look at me and say, "What'd I do?" And I'm supposed to tell him what he does.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, Jim.
All right, this is hard. I had Billy Price or Dave Remington. They were back and forth.
You're going to get a lot of flack from the Bengal fans for that.
But you talked about Blair Bush. You had Rich Bram, who was an anchor there for many years.
Good player.
Bob, you were the first center. Your number is retired. You in the old AFL, the American Football League, this old logo that I got on the side of my hat, you were all pro in 1968, brother. Dude, I got goosebumps thinking about that. We have Bengal history on the screen with us right now, guys. So this is a no-brainer, Bob. I know you're being modest. Dave Lapham loved talking about you, how good you were, how versatile you were, how quick and athletic you were. For Paul Brown, the absolute NFL football legend, to make sure that you were the first draft pick says something very special about you, brother. So very simple decision right here. Bob Johnson, the best center in Bengal history.
Thank you very much. Can I say one quick thing? When I was drafted in 1968, the draft was not on television. It wasn't at all publicized like it is now. And the Chicago Bears told me they were going to take me number 1, and they were the 6th pick. And that was when George Halas was running the team. They didn't pay well. So I was all worried I was going to – and they projected me as a defensive end, which I couldn't believe. I hadn't played defense since high school. The draft started at 8:30 in the morning. I thought they looked like a touch football game. I got you. So I went at like 10:30. We had just gotten married. And I said to my wife, who's still my wife 55 years later, I'm going to class. The Bears lied to me. They weren't taking me number 1. I come back, and this is the first year of the Bengals. My wife meets me in the parking lot and says, "What's a Bengal?" She had never heard. She said, "This guy named Brown called, and I told him you were at class, and he said he'd call back." It was Coach Brown. It was Paul Brown who called, and she had no idea who he was.
So wait a minute, Bob. You said you've been married over 50 years?
I've been married 55 years.
Special place in heaven for your wife, brother. She had to deal with you that many.
You are right.
All right, guys. Let's go ahead. Let's go to tight end.
Oh, good one.
Tight end. I'm going to go to first one because I don't think anybody else is going to pick him. But I think his career was short. But I'm going to go Dan Ross.
Oh.
Dan Ross could block. He could do everything. Both years the Bengals made the playoffs when he was there. He was their leading receiver. He was on the, I think, Professional Football Writers Association all-rookie team in 1979. 1981 AFC Championship game, I remember him diving, laying out like this, catching the back of the football in 59-degree below weather. And I think he's a guy who, similar to a Mark Bavaro with the Giants, where he took such a beating the way he played. He only lasted 5 or 6 years. And, of course, Bavaro won a Super Bowl and he was in New York, so they blow him up. I'm taking Dan Ross. Jim, am I nuts?
No, man. I had 3 of my tight ends on this. I had Ross number 3 though, and I'm going to make a quick snap decision here. But I love Rodney Holman. That was kind of my prime watching football. That dude played for 11 years. That dude could do it all. Love Rodney Holman. But man, how do you not say Bob Trumpy, man? He was a game-changing tight end in the NFL, man. Bill Walsh using him like no other tight end had ever been used prior to Bob Trumpy. I mean, I guess I'm leaning towards, man, this is tough, guys. I'm going to lean towards Trumpy just because of the impact he made. I mean, Walsh used him in mismatched situations, had him all over the place as a tight end, which has never been done before at that point in time in the NFL. But I think just by a hair, I got to go Trump.
I tell you what, let me jump in. To begin with, Trumpy was my roommate for all those years.
Oh, boy.
Well, and above all, he wasn't boring. He may not have been. But we didn't agree on anything. But I'll tell you what, the guy was a much better blocker than people gave him credit for. You know, he was tall and skinny. But if you watch him, and if you remember those very first years, a lot of times Paul Robinson gained 1,000 yards behind Trumpy running a play that you were supposed to. He'd say to Paul Robinson, "You run as far as you can to the sidelines and turn up." And all they said to Trumpy was, "You stay with that outside linebacker." And I'm telling you, Paul Robinson gained 1,000 yards, and about 850 of it was on Bob Trumpy's back. Trumpy, Trumpy was an all-state basketball player. He was a very good player. I mean, I know he's a bit of a controversial person, and he probably deserves that.
No, Bob, come on. I used to listen to his show in the late 70s, early mid-80s. He was never controversial. And he loved the Brown family. So.
Yeah, right. Well, but I tell you, he was an unusual athlete. And I tell you the thing, when we first came out in 1968, you remember teams played a lot of man-to-man. Yeah. And it was a guy named, I want to say Kenny Graham, who was a strong safety for the San Diego Chargers. Maybe you guys remember this better than I do. Trumpy killed him. He'd run a post pattern one time, and then you'd run an angle you call it a flag pattern. He just killed him. And I think, and Trumpy was a much better deep receiver. I might have said this already, but I think he won the Illinois 220-yard dash his senior year in high school. Once he got rolling, he could really run.
All right, Joe.
You know what? Trumpy, Ross. They obviously all-time Bengal greats, but I'm going with the Louisiana kid, man. I'm going with Rodney Holman, brother.
Yeah.
And when you look, the year we went to the Super Bowl, you have having 1,000-yard rushers, JB, and then you had Stanley, and I think Stanley gained maybe 600-700 yards that year as well. Rodney, you're talking about him blocking, and I'm witnessing him blocking some of the best outside linebackers. I'm witnessing him blocking some of the best defensive ends in football, and then I see him beating some of the best safeties in football. Rodney's, he's a hell of a guy, man, and he's a lunch pail guy, man. That never, he's not going to get into, any verbal spats or squabbles. He's just gonna, you better strap it up. You better strap it up every day, every play, because he's coming 100 miles an hour again. And I've seen him get beat, and you wouldn't know it, because the next play he's gonna get up and he's gonna smack you in the mouth. So that's my guy, and I'm a little biased because I did play with him. I know Bob, that Trumpy was your guy. He's your roommate. And I get it. There. But we're arguing about 3 great tight ends.
That's right.
I mean, one A, one B, one C. So that's what it is. But my guy is Holman, man. I love that dude.
Yep.
Holman played with a very good team, and there's some pressure off. When Trumpy played, Eric Crabtree and Speedy Thomas were our 2 wide receivers, and neither one of them were speedy. And then, of course, we drafted Isaac Curtis after that. But I mean, the first couple of years that Trumpy caught a lot of passes, he was really a surprise. And he's a 12th round draft choice, so it wasn't like he came in and was going to start. Right. I mean, he earned.
Yeah, because wasn't he more like the number 1 receiver?
Oh yeah. And what really hurt him was when Greg Cook got hurt. Greg just played 4 games when he was healthy, and he and Trumpy connected on a bunch of deep passes. This would have been in 1969 in Nippert Stadium, if you're talking about history. If Greg Cook had stayed healthy that year, there's no telling how many passes Trumpy would have caught.
Agree.
Yeah, and you guys beat the Raiders and the Chiefs
in
the first 3 or 4 games? And those were the 2 best teams in the AFL at that
Absolutely. And if you look back, Trumpy had big pieces of both of those. He was a very unusual deep receiver for a big tight end.
Yeah, actually, him and John Mackey, I think, were the first tight ends that were really deep threats, weren't they?
Yep. And
so,
go ahead.
So Bob, Trumpy used to go in at halftime to smoke a cigarette, then come out and play the second half, right?
And Coach, what was really funny is Coach Brown knew it. So when it was time, Coach Brown would stand up and he was going to do his little talking. Trumpy would say, "Somebody go get Trumpy." Exactly.
You know what? I never seen that for my first 7 years, and then first year free agency '93, I went to the Raiders. I was my greatest year in my career, but this training camp, they're smoking, they're smoking squares, man, and I said, okay, wait, maybe it's practices. Then you get to the game, and they weren't hiding it. There, Biletnikoff, he's coaching. He's over there smoking the square. You got some of the defensive line. They're smoking in the locker room. So I'm just like, what the hell? But that was the Raiders, man. So I never witnessed that until I went to the Raiders. So I was just that just blew my mind. These guys
playing the Raiders
smoking squares.
Because they were a bunch of goofy guys.
Yeah, talent. Yeah.
All right, guys, let's move on to wide receivers. You get 2.
Oh, this is a hard one here.
Is it?
For me, it is.
I don't think it's hard.
I
I got a bona fide number 1. I don't have 1A, 1A, or 1B. I have a number 1.
Who's your number 1?
My number 1 is the real 85.
Isaac Curtis.
That's Isaac Curtis. Isaac Curtis, and
he should be in the Hall of Fame too. His numbers are better than Lynn Swann.
Anybody else, but following Isaac's a West Coast guy, but Isaac Curtis, they made rules for Isaac Curtis.
Yeah,
so when you're talking about a guy that changed the game from that position, and the things that he did when the cornerbacks and DBs could grab his face mask and could hold him and slam him on the ground. you know, all these things that, and he was still so fast and you know, just had the ability to, you know, to you had to game plan against this guy, man. So my number one guy by far is Isaac Curtis.
Joe, you know what? Real quick though, we had a record today set by Joe Kelly.
What's that?
He went over 34 minutes before saying.
Oh yeah. This is street.
And the cute thing was, as he started to say it, he went.
Yeah.
I was told this was PG-13, Joe. Damn it! Come on.
All right.
Well, ain't that what PG-13 means?
Yeah, right.
You're right.
You might see a quick move, but nothing else.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll go my number two guy. You know, obviously, I do have a 2A and a 2B, right? And I'm going to be Bob. I'm not going to be like Bob, right? You know, my roommate was Chris, so I'm voting for my roommate. You know, Chris Collinsworth. You know, and I give him an Ocho Cinco. Obviously, Ocho Cinco is great, but you know, and when Chris came in as a rookie and how hot he was, and you know what he did in that span, you know, you can put his numbers up with anybody. And when you talk about it wasn't a team that threw 45 times a game, you know. So you know, I'm going to go with Ocho Cinco and Chris, my 2A and 2B.
Is Chris,
Bengal Jim looks like he has an issue.
Is Chris watching right now? Why would you say that, man? Why?
It's my roommate. See, Bob's my roommate. You know,
all right.
It's my roommate.
All right.
What's wrong with Chris? Hey, how about this though, Jim? Who had the bigger impact, Chris or Chad Johnson?
Chad.
Because really, there's no way Chad Johnson can have a bigger impact because he never won us nothing. And the other thing about Chad is, how many playoff games did he have a big game?
Right. So,
I mean, Chris Collinsworth, when he came here in 1981, Isaac was a little bit older. He was still a deep threat, but Chris Collinsworth was fast as hell. He blew the top off the defenses, especially 1981 to 1985. So I think overall, Chad may have had a better career, but Chris Collinsworth made big plays in that Bills game in the Super Bowl. Yeah. I won't rank him number one just because he fumbled the ball in 1981.
Just one quick note on CC, man. You know, you're talking about here this white dude, wide receiver from Florida, won the 100-meter state champ in Florida. In Florida,
well, he played quarterback in Florida too when he first got there.
You're talking about here, people. You're talking about deceptive speed. You're talking about you win the 100-meter dash, 100-yard dash in Florida in high school. You're picking them up and putting them down, brother. You know, so I don't think, and I don't know if a lot of people realize how fast CC was. So
as I was kind of preparing for this, I mean, this is a great position group for the Bengals, man. Chris Collinsworth, I think Carl Pickens needs to be in this conversation. Isaac Curtis, by far, is my number one and 1A. I mean, he did what he did during a time in the NFL where they threw the ball 14 to 17 times a game max. If he played, he could have played in any era of the NFL, in my opinion.
I mean, he had a lot of Virgil Carter, and Virgil couldn't throw the ball deep. I mean, if Greg Cook hadn't gotten hurt, there's no telling what kind of career Ike would have had.
Agreed. I'm going to go.
They'd both be in the Hall of Fame, and we'd have won a couple Super Bowls, and the Steelers would have won a couple less. I think.
I think I'm going to my second one, man. Look, there's no wrong. I love CC. Don't get that twisted. I love Chris. I love AJ, and I love Carl Pickens, but I have to go Chad Johnson. I know we didn't win a Super Bowl. We didn't get to the Super Bowl. We didn't win an AFC championship with him.
We did win a playoff game, Jim.
But understand, during that time when Chad came in, it was rock bottom here in Cincinnati as a fan. I mean, there was nothing. The 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, Chad's persona and his character and the stuff that he did, he damn near built an entire generation of Bengal fans here that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Chad Johnson. I know it kind of got crazy towards the end of his career, but I mean, there's so many great receivers, but Chad was Chad at a great time in this point in city for this city and this franchise and this fan. They needed that Chad Johnson at that point in time. I'm going Isaac and I'm going Chad.
All right, Bob, you had Isaac, right? Who was your second guy?
I think Collinsworth. You know, and Chad Johnson was a great physical receiver, but I think the team aspect of what he did, I think, is detrimental. And anyway, I would go with Collinsworth.
I would say this. I don't think Chad was detrimental his first 5 or 6 years. I think he went over the top with things after about 05, 06. But I can tell you this, guys. I think Isaac is the greatest Bengal receiver that played more than a few years. But I think people forget this. There's a Hall of Fame wide receiver out there that was a Cincinnati Bengal for like 3 or 4 years.
Charlie Joyner.
And that was Charlie Joyner.
Yeah.
And Charlie Joyner is one of the greatest receivers that ever lived. He doesn't get the publicity a lot of other guys do. So what the hell? Since y'all picked everybody else I like too, I'm just going to go with him.
You know, he and Isaac together were that was formidable when you had Charlie.
Yeah.
I think they both benefited from each other. I would say Charlie Joyner benefited a little bit more from Isaac than the other way around. People overplayed Isaac a lot.
Yeah. And the other thing about Joyner was he came here, middle of 72 or 73?
Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's 73. 73, they make the playoffs, they win the division. 75, make the playoffs, get a wild card.
Yep.
And I mean, the biggest problem there was I think those Bengals teams from 1970 to 1977 were all great teams. The problem was you had all-time great teams in Miami, Pittsburgh, and Oakland.
Yeah. I mean, sure, Pittsburgh it was just so difficult to play them. You know, I look back at those Pittsburgh games, and Kenny Anderson would be 21 for 23, and we get beat, 20-19. They just that was a really great defense, really well constructed. They just wouldn't give you anything.
No, that was Bud Carson, who I think was the greatest defensive coordinator that ever lived. But most people don't even know who the hell he was because he failed at Cleveland as a head coach.
Yeah.
But in Bud Carson's defense, everybody but Paul Brown failed at Cleveland.
I got to tell you, you're right about that.
City up north. City up north.
The way that defense was put together, you look at it, and there were a lot of those guys, a couple of individual guys really terrific, but a lot of ordinary people. And
yeah,
Russell was make him all pro. Look back at him, he wasn't a body. Actually, Jack Lang was a bit strong. He made $1 million because they kept freeing him by putting him behind tackles.
Well, Jack Ham, I think, is the most underrated player on that team. I think outside linebacker wise, the only outside linebacker I've seen that was better was Lawrence Taylor.
Well, yeah, but Lawrence Taylor
did everything.
Comparing their physical use is not fair. Because Jack Ham was very ordinary side. Great.
But Jack Ham was one of the best coverage outside linebackers to find, though.
All right, here's a quiz for you guys. Charlie Joyner. Speaking of Charlie Joyner, 76, the Bengals traded him to San Diego for what player?
Troy
Bacon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I won.
All-time bingo. All-time bingo.
We need buzzers on here.
Yeah.
Boy, you talk about a guy that could play, who was a terrible influence on the team, but and could play. You watch him in pass rush drills.
I told you, Jim. I've had like 6 guys off the 70s Bengals team all say the same thing about him.
I've heard stories.
I can tell you stories that blister your ears, but Coy was.
I've heard a few.
Paul Brown wanted to strangle him, I'm sure.
Oh.
All right, guys, let's go to running back, which this is another difficult one. We'll make Joe go first.
Yeah. Well. Once again, it's easy for me because I played.
He's picking James Brooks, Ickey Woods, and Stanford Jennings and Stanley Wilson.
I think I played against some great running backs, man. Played against Walter, man. Played against Eric Dickerson. Played against Emmitt Smith. Barry Sanders. Pound for pound, my 11 years of football, there's not a tougher motherfucking football than number 21.
Yeah.
Period. It's not close. So seeing this dude 179, 182 pounds soaking wet. I seen him annihilate linebackers blitzing. I seen him run over, you remember those mid 80s, everybody was going to the big safeties, safeties 240, and I seen him coming, and there, here's a safety and it's him and it's against the safety. And I seen this dude run those guys over. I seen him running around guys. I'd seen him stick his nose in and block a offensive tackle. So when I'm saying this, what I witnessed, he man, pound for pound, that dude was amazing, man. So
you get 2, Joe.
Yeah. So okay, now I'm gonna come down a little bit now. So then I gotta go with the kid what he did in the years he was here, and then the best and greatest of all, he was a Husky, man. So, Corey Dillon, man, no doubt, man, what that dude was, he ran with bad intentions. He was beast mode before beast mode. If you talk to some of the linebackers and DBs that tried to tackle, Corey Dillon, they'll tell you that this he was that beast mode guy. So, I'm going with James Brooks and Corey Dillon, my two guys.
All right. I will just say this. I agree, but I also want to throw Pete Johnson in there. Essex Johnson, Paul Robinson, just because I think those are two guys without injuries.
Bob, I thought you said we only. I thought you said we only get two, man. You just picked four.
Yeah, I know. I picked four. So you know what, Joe? We were going two wide receivers, and you ended up with a 2A, a 2B, and a 2C. So
it's Bob. Bob started it off like that, man. So
All right.
okay, so we'll go to Bob now. Right. Who do you got at running back, Bob?
I don't give James Brooks probably the due that he had, because I mean, you talk about a guy that was durable and ran the ball a lot, but the two guys I played with, Pete Johnson was a physical mutant. I mean, he was 285 pounds and probably not more than 6'1". He could stand under a basket and jump up and dunk it backwards with two hands. I mean, at 6'1", 285. We were in Wilmington one day, and I'm walking. In Wilmington, you walked across the gym from the dressing room. You go, "Hey, Bob, watch this." He jumps up and stuffs the ball behind his head. I couldn't believe it. But you'd be blocking someone and be kind of in a stalemate. You might have had a half a yard gain, and Pete would just hit you, and it was like a tidal wave carrying we gained 4 or 5 yards. I mean, I'd roll over and say, "God bless you, Pete." I'll tell you, the other guy, although he did get hurt and he wasn't that durable, but I mean, he would have, if you watch the runs that Essex Johnson made, I mean, I know I'm talking about people I played with because I really feel like I know him. Only problem with Essex is he really wasn't very durable, but he was a fantastic. If you really go back and look at all the film, you could put a highlight film together of Essex running, and it's just unbelievable.
All right, Jim.
And I would say this: you got to look at the offensive line that Essex had in front of him, and I think it's almost not fair when you get to James Brooks. You got Munoz, and you really got a very good offensive line overall. And at times we had a pretty good offensive line, but we always had a hole or two that weren't quite good enough. So I mean, sometimes you got to judge what help a guy had, and Essex was something. Yeah. Okay.
I tell you what's tough. This was an easy decision for me, but I just want to run through some names. Pete Johnson was one of my guys, man. He could probably dunk backwards on that hoop, standing flat-footed with a thing of Crown Royal in his hand. That dude could play. Rudy Clark, Paul Robinson, Essex Johnson, Harold Green had a hell of a couple years for us. Rudy Johnson, these guys, man, some really good running backs in the history.
How about the late Cedric Benson?
Cedric,
you're right, for a few years too.
But for me, like one of my top 5 all-time favorite players ever, James Brooks. I mean, that dude would run through you, over you, around you. This dude was this big. He didn't care. That dude was so versatile in everything he did. And loved watching him play. But him and Corey Dillon, man. Corey Dillon, again, is another guy that's going to be in the Ring of Honor, who absolutely is in the Hall of Fame discussion, should be. This dude was the dominant, the great combination of speed and power. I mean, he still holds Bengal records to this day for rushing yards in a game. This guy played on some really, really bad football teams, guys. And I
know I watched all those games.
Yeah, I used to have to go into the stadium every single game, and my highlight was watching the Carl Pickens, the Corey Dillons of the world. But I can't imagine if Corey Dillon played on a team that had a stacked offensive line or had a winning tradition at that time.
Well, we saw what he did the 1 year in New England.
1,300 plus,
1,600 yards, something like that. Yeah.
Since you're saying the offensive line was so bad, I want to say I didn't ever play with the man.
So James Brooks and Corey Dillon are like two of the best, brother.
And he shouldn't be in the conversation about the best, but I tell you, Booby Clark, for just pure size and speed, the problem was you didn't quite know. He didn't ever pick a hole. I mean, all the offensive linemen called him booby backs because he would just, big, strong, powerful. He'd just smack into whatever was there, and it was usually one of our backs. So we'd come out of the game and we go, "I got a booby back."
Yeah. And I also I don't want to remiss. I'll be remiss to not to mention my boy the Inkster. You talking about a guy who probably has the greatest rookie year in Bengal history. And, people say what happened to him. He came back, he blew out one knee, he rehabbed, he came back the following year, blew out the other knee, came back the following year after that and blew out the original knee. So, it's running back, you got 3 ACL tears, which really killed his career. But, as far as, we all know, it's probably the most popular,
All
one
right,
of the
guys.
most popular guys in Bengal history.
Quarterback, Bob.
Well,
To me, this is a no-brainer.
well, I mean, are we talking about current players too? Because I think Joe Burrow.
We could talk about current players too, but my pick would be Kenny Anderson
me too.
just because Anderson achieved more so far.
Yeah, I mean
But that's a no-brainer so far.
the only thing Kenny wasn't was a big, strong guy, hell of a player, and a great guy, and a great team guy, and a very incredibly accurate passer. And you guys talked about the Steeler defense. The Browns had a good defense when we played, and the Oilers had a very good defense. So in our division, Kenny kept playing those same guys. And I think the world of him, and I think he was a great quarterback.
All right, Joe, agree? Disagree?
I have to agree, man. It has to be Kenny.
Hey, Joe, hopefully we'll
that
redo this
dude-
show
that dude
in the middle of
blocks.
February, and there'll be a new number one,
I'm
if you know
saying
what I mean.
That dude 2 blocks from me, and I turn around, I can look at the stadium. That dude, I don't think that he's not only going to be the greatest Bengal quarterback in history if he stays healthy. That dude has a chance to be.
Don't jinx it, Joe.
I'm not. Hey, it is what it is. This kid is doing it, man. So I feel that way, but definitely, I'm going with Kenny. And I was fortunate to be able to play with Kenny his last year. Of course, Boomer was still starting, but just kind of, being there and being able to rub elbows with guy that led the Bengals to their first Super Bowl.
The one of the we got to talk about is the rules changes have favored passing.
Oh yeah.
Statistically, Joe Burrows is going to, I would assume, would pass all these guys, especially with Jamar playing.
It's a passing game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've tied the hands of the defense, and the offense can run wild.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, the offense, Bob, when you started playing, you had to block like that, right?
And
you couldn't use your hands.
The stats, when you start looking at stats, the way analytics is taking over the game, that's going to kind of make things kind of unfair because you're going to have some really great running backs now, and you see the longevity of the running back position is not going to be long. You see this guy, well, man, you got to put this guy's greater than Isaac Curtis. This guy, caught 14,000 yards. Well, they threw the ball 57 times a game. Right. So when you look at that, man, it's stats. And I've never been a stat guy.
Hey, Joe, they also play a lot more games than these.
Yeah, stats are misleading. So it's about the impact that you make, and guys. Emmitt Smith, one of the greatest running backs, but put Barry behind that offensive line. Now I played against that offensive line. Put Barry Sanders behind that line and see if there was a difference. So you look at that and look at the times changing. But you can still good players, good corners, good safeties, good running backs, good wide receivers when you see it, linebackers, linemen, that hasn't changed, but the analytics is definitely changing the game, and it's going to change, historically when you're talking about putting guys in the Hall of Fame because of stats. Stats are going to be misleading because the game has changed so much.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, you guys just hit this on the head, man. One of the things that is slowing the process down for Ken Anderson being in the Hall of Fame is exactly what you guys are saying. These voters are looking at these stats. You had Ken Anderson played in an era where they didn't throw the ball a whole lot, guys, right? So Ken Anderson, the only quarterback that won 4 passing titles in 2 different decades. This guy,
he's the only one to do it back to back too. Or he's the first one to do it back to back.
This guy was something special, man, and this is a guy that's already in the Ring of Honor. This is a guy that is just like Ken Riley, way overdue to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He is now in that final 12 on that list, and here in August, I think August 22nd is when the vote comes out to get to that 40.
I'm claiming it. I'm claiming it, Bingo. It's Bingo Jim. I'm claiming it. He's getting in.
Well, if we want him in that top,
I think this is the best chance.
yeah,
so far.
we need him in the top 6, top 3. He gets in.
Yeah.
But if he wasn't in the top 6 last year. He was like 7 or 8. So if we can get him in that top 6, top 3, he gets in. Top 6 means he probably goes in next year. I'm tired of waiting. I want it to be this year, but he's this close, guys. And I tell you what, you cannot compare quarterbacks of different eras, period. This guy was a game-changing
Well, this is the thing, though. He was the first quarterback to really consistently complete more than 60% of his passes. A lot of that was Bill Walsh's West Coast offense, 73 on, 72 on. But when you look at what he did, I mean, it's like the Super Bowl he played in, the Bengals lost the game. But I think he was like one of just 2 or 3 quarterbacks to throw for over 300 yards in a Super Bowl at that time. The only other one, I think, was Terry Bradshaw in Super Bowl 13 or 14. Yeah, so when you look at him and you compare him to the guys of his time, and I think it's the same thing that hurts Isaac. Because Isaac Curtis, if you look at his stats, they're better than Lynn Swann's. The difference is Lynn Swann made those catches in Super Bowl 10 and won an MVP.
Right.
Yeah. And to me, John Stallworth was better than Lynn Swann.
Yeah.
And I think Isaac Curtis is better than Lynn Swann.
It's interesting to me what, we interviewed Dan Fouts about a month and a half ago to kind of get, a Hall of Famer that didn't play, that played against Kenny. And Dan Fouts is out here talking about why he thinks Ken Anderson should be in the Hall of Fame. You got all these arguments why he shouldn't be, right? So Dan Fouts was like nailing everyone. I'm like, look, they say he's a system quarterback. What the hell was I? Dan Fouts said I was a system quarterback. Steve Young was a system quarterback.
Did Dan Fouts say he should be in because I'm in and he was better than me? Because that would be the truth.
Well, I didn't want to tell him that Ken Anderson was better than him when we were interviewing him. But
it was obvious in 1981.
Oh, no doubt. But this is a no-brainer. I mean, Bengals have had not a ton of quarterbacks in history because they've had long stints at quarterback with Ken Anderson, Boomer Esiason, Carson. I mean, they haven't had a quarterback every other year like the city up north has had a quarterback. Seems like 20 different quarterbacks in the past 5 years. So very good position group for the Bengals, very good quarterbacks in this history. But this is an absolute no-brainer, Ken Anderson.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. We will come back and do a defensive show. I don't know if we're going to do that on your network, Jim, or on ours, but we'll figure that out. I'm fine with coming over with you guys, and then we can bring Joe on and make him pick himself an outside linebacker the way he was trying to do with Bob.
We got some. I got some good choices at linebacker. Couple surprises.
The first one starts with the letter Reggie.
You already know.
Reggie. Hell yeah.
It's the letter Reggie.
Yeah, not even close, brother. Yeah. So.
Hey, Bob, thanks for joining us today. You got any closing words?
Thank you. That was fun. Nice to be with you guys.
You too, Bob. Good seeing you.
All right.
See you.
Good seeing you,
Jim?
No, thank you guys. Appreciate you. Here I'm on the screen with 2 legends and some guy named, I don't know, but that was awesome.
Joe. His name's Joe.
No, I appreciate you. Let me be part of this, man. I love this stuff, man. I eat it up.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, any final words?
Oh, man, I had a great time, man. It's just talking about football, talking about players, man, even though, I played 11 years, man, I'm a fan. I love the game, love where we are as an organization, even though, I played for, 5 other teams. But, I'm a Bengal, man. I'm a Cincinnati guy now. So I love talking about, football. I love being around football. I can do this all day, man, and appreciate you having me on and talking with some great guys.
Hey, and by the way, I didn't pick my favorite or my number 1 center, if you noticed when Bob was on, but it's Blair Bush. Well, Bob's such a nice guy.
Yeah,
I mean,
Good deal.
All right, guys, and next Wednesday, me and Ty, maybe Joe, is going to be back to start a new season of Bengals football. We'll preview the Bengals' first preseason game. I think that's next Friday night.
Next Friday, yeah.
Which stinks because my high school football team, my coach has got a scrimmage on the same night. But to tell you the truth, I don't even watch.
I'll be in Vegas, so it'll be a good time.
Yeah, I don't even watch preseason football, Jim, because if I do, the only thing I do is sit there and just hope nobody gets hurt.
Well, I mean, I love watching the young guys trying to make the teams, man. I like watching that aspect of it for sure.
Yeah. Good deal.
All right, guys.
Okay,
Go ahead, Joe.
Man, good deal, man. All right, see you guys.
All right, guys, remember, follow us on Twitter at Grueling Truth. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell notification button, and check out BetMGM to bet all the Bengals or NFL games this year. But for now, for Bob Johnson, Joe Kelly, Jim Foster, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.
Who day, baby.